Welcome to The World This Week with Alicia Edwards, a look back at some of the biggest global news stories for an international city, brought to you by the London Live News team. Tonight, at least 20 people have died in Argentina after taking what is thought to be poisoned cocaine. The Bangladeshi children missing their education because of COVID restrictions as trade fairs continue in the capital city. A warning in Western Australia as two separate bushfires threaten lives, and the two-toed baby sloth rescued in Colombia. That's all on the way before 7:30, but first, Russia has condemned the US decision to send extra troops to Europe to support its NATO allies amid continuing fears of a Russian invasion of Ukraine. Moscow said it was a destructive step which heightened tension and reduced the scope for a political solution. This comes as earlier in the week, Boris Johnson had his delayed call with the Russian president. He warned that a further incursion into Ukraine would be a tragic miscalculation. The Prime Minister expressed his deep concern about Russia massing an estimated 100,000 troops on the Ukrainian border when they spoke on Wednesday afternoon. Downing Street said Boris Johnson stressed during a call lasting around 45 minutes that Ukraine has a right to aspire to NATO membership, a move which has been strongly opposed by Putin. The pair are said to have agreed that the aggravation was in no one's interest as they discussed dialogue and diplomacy. The PM had been due to speak to the Russian leader on Monday, but delayed it to deal with the fallout from Sue Gray's report into parties in Downing Street. And we'll have more on that a little later in the programme. OK, we head to Syria next, where the leader of the violent Islamic State group was killed during an overnight raid in Syria's northwestern Idlib province on Thursday. Joe Biden said the raid targeted Abu Ibrahim al-Qurayshi, who took over as head of the militant group in 2019. These pictures show the aftermath of the raid, with the top floor of the house being almost totally destroyed in Thursday's raid. First responders reported that 13 people had been killed, including 6 children and 4 women. The operation came as IS had been trying for a resurgence with a series of attacks in the region, including a 10-day assault late last month to seize a prison. Biden said in a statement that he ordered the raid to protect the American people and our allies and make the world a safer place.
I directed the Department of Defense to take every precaution possible to minimize civilian casualties. Knowing that this terrorist had chosen to surround himself with families, including children, we made a choice to pursue a special forces raid at a much greater risk than to our own people, rather than targeting him with an airstrike. We made this choice to minimize civilian casualties. Our team is still compiling the report, but we do know that as our troops approached to capture the terrorist, in a final act of desperate cowardness, he, with no regard to the lives of his own family or others in the building, he chose to blow himself up, not just to the vest, but to blow up that 3rd floor, rather than face justice for the crimes he has committed, taking several members of his family with him, just as his predecessor did.
US President Joe Biden there. Now, in Argentina, adulterated cocaine has killed at least 20 people and left 74 in hospitals around the Buenos Aires region. That's according to the authorities. The crowd await the news of their loved ones here outside a hospital. Authorities were searching frantically for the remainder of the deadly batch to get it off the streets before it's consumed, as experts have been analysing the drug to determine what was in it that caused the deaths. Police said that the cocaine was sold in the poor neighbourhood of Puerto 8 in San Martin, a suburb to the north of Argentina's capital. A dozen people have been arrested. People in the neighbourhood used burning tyres to block a highway in protest against what they described as the random detention of innocent people during police raids. Now, at least 4 people died and 1 is missing after large parts of Haiti flooded following torrential rain. The country's northern and southern regions were the hardest hit. Authorities said they were struggling to provide drinking water and were unable to reach several communities affected by the floods. More than 2,500 homes were damaged and some 500 people are staying in a temporary shelter. Schools have been closed again in Bangladesh as coronavirus infections surge, mostly because of the Omicron variant, much to the disappointment of students and teachers. The school closure initially was just for 2 weeks, but on Wednesday the Education Minister announced it was to be extended. Teachers at a school in Dhaka's Moghul Bazaar area were frustrated over having to restart online classes for their 500 students.
The way students can perceive the lessons in a classroom, that's not possible in an online class. There are many factors. One thing is teaching materials. It's very important to use teaching materials in order to make the students' perception clear. Online classes can't reach to this point. Besides, teachers like us are habituated with teaching in a classroom. Students come to school and play with their mates. It develops their mind and increased knowledge. They're being deprived of these things and much more. They've become confined. They are under mental pressure. They seem to be a bit behind their usual state.
Well, the school closures have come at a time when Bangladesh is still allowing business events like a month-long trade fair, which began last month. An annual month-long book fair is also set to go ahead, drawing thousands more visitors. Experts say the lack of consistency is illogical and undermines pandemic precautions.
Severity of the disease is also low in Bangladesh, although the number is very, very high, sometimes reaching records. But the rate of admission, rate of need for hospitalization, rate of oxygen requirement is fairly low. It's not like the Delta wave driven by, in the second wave it was driven by Delta, and it was quite, a very catastrophic situation. That has not reached yet. The capacity of the healthcare has not been saturated yet. We never know that the saturation may be crossed because the substantial number of our older population, more than 4 million, are still unvaccinated. And as I said, only 35% has been vaccinated twice. So there is a lot of unprotected group of people, and we must be careful about coming to a conclusion that this wave will not create a catastrophic situation.
Professor Ali there. And the Winter Olympics has officially kicked off in Beijing, with the opening ceremony taking place on Friday. Hazmat suits and nasal swabs are the welcoming scene for visitors to Beijing when they plunge into the closed-loop system, which is in place for the duration of the Games. The city remains entirely sealed off, and exiting the closed loop is impossible, even for the volunteers and service personnel who have isolated, and they must do again post-Games before they are able to re-enter their own city. Well, Team GB medal prospect Laura Dees is there now, and she's been preparing to compete as part of the skeleton team.
So we've managed to have a couple of track walks, and we've also had 1 day of training. So it's been really great to get back on the ice. We've had, because of travel and logistics and so on, we've had a few weeks off the ice, which isn't ideal when you're talking about, being really fine-tuned on your sled. Having time off it isn't great, but it was really nice to have a day of training yesterday to get back on the sled and just to get back in tune with our equipment, and then also with the track as well, and obviously to see what's the same as the test event in October and what might have changed. It's really interesting because you expect everyone to peak, but you don't really know what that's going to look like until race day, and it's different for everyone. So I think the biggest unknown quantity is probably the Chinese athletes, because they've been basically training in China. They haven't done many World Cups in the last couple of years, which means that they have a huge bank of knowledge on this track. They've probably done upwards of 500 runs each, I'd have thought, on this track by now, compared to our 30. But, you know, that does put the pressure back on them. You know, it's theirs to lose because of that. So, and as I said, I think we're, you know, the very nature of the fact that we don't have our own track means that we're very used to going somewhere and figuring it out quickly.
Laura Dees there. Well, the games have got started and are taking place over the next 2 weeks. Best of luck to Team GB. Now, the World This Week continues after this short break. And coming up, as New Zealand prepares to reopen after months of closure due to COVID, we'll hear about how people are feeling about the rule change. Hello there, welcome back. You're watching The World This Week from the London Live News team, a review of the main international stories that have broken over the last 7 days. Still to come before 7:30, marking the year of the Tiger, Lunar New Year celebrations have been taking place across the globe. First, here in the UK, another turbulent week for Boris Johnson, who's shown no sign of bowing to the growing calls from Tory MPs to resign as Downing Street is investigated by the police over allegations of lockdown breaching parties. This week, long-term aide of the PM, Munira Mirza, quit as Number 10's head of policy on Thursday after the PM refused to apologise for making a slur about Sir Keir Starmer failing to prosecute Jimmy Savile while the now Labour leader was Director of Public Prosecutions. She said there was no fair or reasonable basis for that assertion and that this was not the usual cut and thrust of politics. While her decision made way for a number of other aides to also take the leap and leave Downing Street. Also earlier in the week, 3 Tory MPs withdrew their support, starting with senior Conservative Tobias Ellwood, who said he had submitted a formal letter calling for a vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister. Well, this week, speaking in the Commons, the PM promised a shake-up of Number 10 after it emerged police were investigating at least 12 events across the government for COVID breaches, including the Prime Minister's birthday celebration and gathering in his Downing Street flat. Scotland Yard said it was reviewing a bundle of information passed to officers by the Sue Gray inquiry.
I think that the way that this has progressed has been quite right. I think it's been quite right that the Cabinet Office have been allowed to develop their own inquiry and investigations. And I do think it's quite right now that where we believe that there may be a potential breach of the COVID regulations that we now investigate from New Scotland Yard.
Mr. Speaker, I get it and I will fix it. And I want to say... And I want to say to the people of this country, I know what the issue is. Yes, Mr. Speaker, yes. It's whether this government can be trusted to deliver.
Well, the report was pared back at the request of the police as it carries out the investigation. Boris Johnson initially refused to have the full report published to the public, but Downing Street was later forced to cave in to mounting pressure on the issue by saying that Sue Gray will be asked to update her work following the conclusion of the police investigation, with the Prime Minister committed to publishing it. Interest rates have risen for the second time in 3 months as the Bank of England tries to curb a rapid rise in the cost of living. The hike to 0.5% from 0.25% came as the bank warned that price rises could speed up. Prices are expected to climb faster than pay, putting the biggest squeeze on household finances in decades. It comes as the Chancellor unveiled a 3-part support package to help households cope with a 54% jump in energy bills.
First, we will spread the worst of the extra costs of this year's energy price shock over time. This year, all domestic electricity customers will receive an upfront discount on their bills worth £200. Energy suppliers will apply the discount on people's bills from October, with the government meeting the cost in full. That discount will automatically be repaid from people's bills in equal £40 instalments over the next 5 years. This is the right way to support people while staying on track with our plans to repair the public finances. And because we are taking a fiscally responsible approach, we can also provide more help faster to those who need it most. The second part of our plan. We're going to give people a £150 council tax rebate to help with the cost of energy in April, and this discount won't need to be repaid. And I do want to be clear with the House that we are deliberately not just giving support to people on benefits. Lots of people on middle incomes are struggling right now too. So we have decided to provide the council tax rebate to households in bands A to D. This means around 80% of all homes in England will benefit. And the third part of our plan will provide local authorities with a discretionary fund of nearly £150 million to help those lower income households who happen to live in higher council tax properties and households in bands A to D who are exempt from council tax at all.
Chancellor Rishi Sunak there. OK, over to New Zealand now, where after nearly 2 years of strict curbs on international travel in response to the pandemic, the country's borders will begin a phased reopening at the end of the month. The change will be welcomed by thousands of citizens abroad who've endured long waits to return home. Since the start of the pandemic, New Zealand has enacted some of the world's strictest border controls. Most incoming travellers need to spend 10 days in a quarantine hotel room run by the military, a requirement which has created a bottleneck at the border. People gave cautious support to the government's announcement.
People will be worried, but then there got to be a precaution, right? You need to be double vaxxed. We can't just accept everybody who's not vaxxed. So I think once we have that policy, I think it should be all right.
Friends making babies, I've got family to see, so yeah, I'm quite ready.
I am worried, but if I'm gonna think like in generally, it's everywhere. Like you cannot control it as much as we can control it. Like it's just there. It's gonna come in and come in.
That said, we're probably gonna have to bite that bullet at some time and get on with life as it should be. So yeah, it's probably had to come at some point. So.
Ricardo Menendez March of the New Zealand Greens Party welcomed the move, but said the reopening of the borders should prioritise family reunification over things like profit and tourism.
Yeah, I'm really happy for the many Kiwi families who will now be able to be together, but for migrant families, many of them will be facing a long wait and inequities that shouldn't be happening. There's no reason to prioritise migrants from the UK over people from India or leave behind low-income migrants while we let high-income migrants come in. The way that the reopening has been set up means that high-income earners and those from visa waiver countries will be able to enter New Zealand months before people from India. And we're talking about families who've been separated for a couple of years now, some who haven't seen their children. Our reopening plan should prioritise family reunification over things like profit and tourism.
Well, over to Western Australia now, where authorities issued an emergency warning for a wildfire burning near homes in Perth this week. The Department of Fire and Emergency Services said the fire was burning out of control in parts of East Rockingham in the city's south. It came as there was already another blaze at emergency level near the Margaret River in the state's south. Western Australia has endured record heat this summer, with Perth recording 10 days above 40 degrees Celsius. Over to the US now.
0, ignition, liftoff of L-87. Go Falcon, go, go.
This is the moment a US satellite for the National Reconnaissance Office was launched into space from California on Wednesday. The Falcon 9 rocket's first stage flew back to the seaside base northwest of Los Angeles and landed so that it can be reused in a future mission.
Again, this is the first flight for this booster and first landing attempt.
Stage 1, landing leg, deploy.
Central Coast residents were advised to expect sonic booms as the booster returned. There were just 2 NRO launches last year, with plans for more than half a dozen more this year. Now, Lunar New Year celebrations took place across the globe this week, celebrating on the 1st of February and welcoming the Year of the Tiger. A week of celebration is now in full swing. These pictures from Beijing, where dozens of people bowed in prayer before the Lama temple, despite the sacred Buddhist site being closed over the holiday period out of COVID-19 concerns. This year, the celebrations coincide with the Winter Olympics, which have opened at the end of the week-long holiday. This will be the third New Year celebrated in the shadow of the pandemic. It was 2 days before the holiday in 2020 that China locked down Wuhan. Less restrictions on celebrations in New York City's Chinatown, with dancing lions, pageantry and firecrackers to ward off evil spirits. Stephen Tin is from the Better Chinatown Society.
The tiger represents energy. Okay, it's one of the, beside the dragon, the tiger is one of the strongest year health-wise. So you come at the right time. So hopefully we had the tiger help us get rid of all the pandemic.
Pictures there from New York City. Well, in London, there was a royal visit to mark the new year. The Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall took part in an eye-dotting ceremony, which is said to make the traditional lion dancers come alive. Well, Xin Yan Kuai Le to all. And just before we leave you this evening, we bring you pictures of this sloth being rescued and cared for by experts in Colombia. A vet tending the Hoffman's two-toed sloth, which is just 1 month old, said it needed round-the-clock care. They're normally with their mothers for a full year, so it will need to be there for some time. The sloth was rescued by firefighters in the rural area of Caparapi. And that's all from The World This Week with Alicia Edwards. We'll see you at 7 next Saturday as we round up the biggest international stories for a global city. Have a great evening.